Artabanus surveyed Memphis from the pharaoh's abandoned palace, the smell of burnt grain still faintly on the wind. The city was conquered, yet silence, not celebration, defined the victory. He immediately understood that the military campaign was over, but the political siege had just begun. The challenge was converting conquest into stable, enduring political control. His first directive was ruthless in its efficiency. All Persian troops were banned from looting or any act of retaliation. Discipline was to be absolute. Fear would be replaced by systematic order. Artabanus ordered the immediate repair of damaged irrigation canals, and critically, the free distribution of Achaemenid grain reserves to the starving populace. This was the invisible siege applied to public works. His actions were designed to communicate a single, unifying message. The pharaoh failed you. The satrap provides for you. He aimed to bypass the Egyptian elite entirely and win the trust of the common people. He appointed trusted local Egyptian scribes and administrators to bureaucratic roles, keeping the familiar, complex civil machine running smoothly. This prevented chaos and fostered a false sense of continuity. The satrapy of Egypt, the sixth prize of the Achaemenid Empire, was technically secure, yet the deeper resistance was cultural, not military. Artabanus, the master logistician, realized his greatest vulnerability was legitimacy. He was a conqueror, but he was not the son of Ra, a title required for ultimate authority. The pervasive, low-grade insurgency began almost immediately, less a military movement and more a campaign of spiritual sabotage. Persian supply depots were never ambushed, but instead their provisions were found spoiled by strange powders. Walls were not attacked, but official decrees were defaced with subtle, ancient curses. The most frequent target was the massive, newly erected Persian banner over the governor's palace, which was repeatedly torn down, only to be replaced within the hour. Artabanus called these attacks the ghost stings, recognizing the subtle genius of the tactic. They caused no physical damage, but instilled pervasive, corrosive doubt among his Persian garrison. The source of these subtle acts was a highly organized, decentralized network. Artabanus knew instinctively this was the work of one mind, Nephitep. His counter-strategy was twofold: cooptation and observation. He would respect the symbols while aggressively hunting the strategist. He approached the priesthood of Ptah, offering massive grants for the reconstruction of temples and participating in ancient rituals, subtly suggesting he was the agent of divine will. He gave specific orders to his intelligence network. Forget the remnants of the pharaoh's army. Find General Nephitep, idol locus of the popular spirit. Artabanus believed that capturing her, the strategist and the symbol, was the only way to solidify the satrapy and silence the ghost stings. General Nephitep, meanwhile, was far from the Persian gaze. Having executed a masterful retreat with her 200 most loyal veterans, disappearing into the vast protective network of the Fayum oasis, she had sacrificed the Scorpion Gate and the main army, but she had saved the spirit of resistance. Her failure had taught her Artabanus's entire doctrine. She spent the initial weeks dismantling her own rigid, centralized command structure, purging the conventional military dogma that had led to her defeat. Nephitep embraced a new operational doctrine, the Phoenix Doctrine. It dictated that they must sacrifice the physical fight to win the moral war. They would operate in small, cell-like groups, each focused on symbolic acts of defiance, never on holding territory or engaging in open battle. Their primary weapon was narrative. She understood Artabanus's need for legitimacy. Their goal was to make that legitimacy impossible by proving the Achaemenid occupation was fundamentally un-Egyptian and therefore cursed. Nephitep adopted a nomadic existence, communicating through complex, multi-layered codes hidden in market prices, temple offerings, and obscure administrative scrolls, the very data Artabanus monitored. She targeted Artabanus's comfort. She struck the infrastructure he most valued, the security of the tax roads he had just restored, and the loyalty of the administrators he had just appointed. An assassination was too noisy and would create a martyr. A symbolic strike that caused doubt and division was far more valuable to the Phoenix Doctrine. The first major ghost sting was the systematic replacement of the official Persian land registry documents in 3 provincial towns with ancient, meticulously forged records of royal ownership. The legal chaos this created in the new satrapy was crippling. paralyzing local land trade and undermining the Persian assurance of property rights. Artabanus reacted with fury, but Neithotep and her operatives were already gone, dissolving into the intricate network of the delta marshes and the silent loyalty of the farmers. Her core team, veterans of the Scorpion Gate and the Pelusium disaster, moved with flawless discipline, their morale fueled by shared grief and a fierce desire for national redemption. They realized that Artabanus fought for empire, but they fought for the memory of Egypt. A fight that requires persistence, not immediate victory. The psychological war intensified. Artabanus countered the land registry chaos by issuing a sweeping decree that temporarily honored all local land titles, harassing efficiency for political stability. Neithotep's response was a wave of small, precise attacks on the local garrisons. Not to inflict casualties, but to steal their meager rations and leave behind elaborate, mocking hieroglyphic notes detailing the Persians' strategic weaknesses. This campaign successfully reversed Artabanus's narrative. The Persian army was suddenly seen by the populace not as an orderly provider, but as a humiliated, overstretched occupying force, vulnerable even to insult. The search for Neithotep became a psychological obsession for Artabanus. His intelligence teams worked relentlessly, focusing on patterns in the ghost stings, the choice of targets, the timing, the tone of the insults. Artabanus identified a clear pattern. Neithotep was using the principles of the adaptable defense to organize her insurgency. She was sacrificing tactical safety for strategic visibility. He knew she would soon execute a symbolic act so grand, so devastating to his legitimacy, that it would force him into a desperate, visible overreaction. Artabanus, in a meeting with his advisors, announced his final grand strategic move, the construction of the obelisk of the sixth satrapy. This monument was designed to be an architectural fusion, a massive traditional Egyptian obelisk. But inscribed with Persian cuneiform celebrating the great king, it was to be erected in the most ancient, central square of Memphis, symbolizing the formal, divine blessing of the Achaemenid takeover. The ceremony was set for the Feast of the Nile, the highest holy day. Artabanus calculated that the significance of the obelisk would be too great for Neithotep to ignore. This would be the climax of the political siege, forcing her out of the shadows. Neithotep received the intelligence regarding the obelisk. It was precisely the kind of symbolic assault on Egyptian identity that the Phoenix Doctrine required her to destroy. "They use our own glory to crown their theft," she declared to her inner council. "We must turn that symbol into a monument to eternal resistance." Her plan was simple. The ceremony itself would become the target. She would not assassinate Artabanus, but assassinate his legitimacy on the world stage. The execution of the plan was terrifying in its complexity. It required the cooperation of priests, dock workers, and even some Persian-appointed architects, a massive infiltration effort. Artabanus's spy network, meanwhile, began to tighten the net. They found a pattern in the spoilage of supplies. The only common thread was the use of specific, rare clay pots used in the Fayum region. The Fayum oasis became the absolute focus of the Achaemenid military. Artabanus deployed only small, rapid units, instructed not to engage, but simply to observe the communication pathways. The obelisk itself became the ultimate strategic focal point. Persian patrols were quadrupled, and Artabanus's personal guards secured the construction site day and night. Days before the ceremony, Neithotep and her core team left the Fayum, using a shallow draft boat disguised as a fishing vessel, slipping silently down the Nile toward Memphis. The city was a powder keg, ready to explode. The citizens were outwardly compliant, but secretly desperate for a sign that resistance was still possible. Artabanus, reviewing the security plans, paused at the proposed placement of the obelisk. It was positioned to dominate the plaza, forcing the crowd's eyes upward. He recognized the flaw. The plaza had 3 main arterial roads leading into it. He immediately ordered all 3 roads to be secured by multiple layers of troops, creating a choke point for the audience, not just the enemy. This was his counter tactic. He was using the principles of Neithotep's own adaptable defense against her, turning the obelisk into a trap by making the audience itself the focus of the security. The Feast of the Nile arrived, a day of blazing sun and massive, expectant crowds. The ceremony began. Artabanus, resplendent in gold armor, stood on the newly erected dais, ready to deliver his speech, legitimizing the Achaemenid king's divine right over Egypt. The obelisk, tall and gleaming, was the center of attention. It was draped in a massive purple cloth ready for the unveiling. As the Persian horn sounded the call for silence, a hidden alarm went off in Artabanus's mind. The silence was too complete, the deference too perfect. At that exact moment, Nithotep and 5 loyalists initiated their strike. They had infiltrated the crowd disguised as water carriers. Their target was not Artabanus, nor the obelisk, but the massive supporting columns of the very dais Artabanus was standing on. They threw specialized, quick-burning Greek firebombs, a tool Artabanus knew well, against the wooden support structures. The wooden dais instantly began to burn, collapsing the platform and the Persian banners with it, plunging Artabanus and his commanders into the dust. The immediate goal was not death, but humiliation and the signal for the waiting crowd to riot. The crowd surged, not knowing whether to cheer the chaos or flee the confusion. The attack was executed with terrifying speed and precision. Natapa and her team moved, not toward escape, but toward the base of the obelisk itself. Artabanus, rising from the rubble, ignored his burning tunic and shouted orders that surprised his own men. "Secure the roads. Do not pursue the attackers. Control the crowd." His quick thinking ensured the Persian troops focused on managing the choke points, preventing the panic from escalating into a full-scale riot, thereby denying Nithotep the mass chaos she needed. Nithotep reached the base of the obelisk. Her final, devastating act was to spray a thick, indelible black pigment prepared from ancient recipes over the freshly carved Persian cuneiform. She was not destroying the monument. She was defacing the declaration of victory, behind the unmistakable symbol of resistance. The moment was spectacular. The dais burned, the general was humiliated, and the glorious obelisk was symbolically blinded by Egyptian rebellion. Persian archers, now recovered, spotted the retreating Nithotep and her team, who were desperately trying to melt back into the surging crowd near the western gate. Artabanus, seeing the defiant smear of black on the monument, felt a chilling admiration for the general. The ghost stings had culminated in a magnificent, physical declaration of war. Artabanus personally led the pursuit, knowing the capture of Nithotep was now mandatory. The entire occupation hinged on this moment. Nithotep, skilled in blending into civilian life, and her team, separated, trusting the confusion of the crowd to cover their escape. But Artabanus had anticipated this. He had deployed a contingent of civilian-clothed Babylonian intelligence agents, indistinguishable from the local populace, to secure the escape routes. These agents, expert at recognizing patterns of military evasion, quickly cornered Nithotep near the abandoned scribal quarter, separating her from her last 2 loyal soldiers. The Phoenix was cornered, captured not by brute force, but by the superior organizational intelligence of the invisible siege. Artabanus strode into the scribal quarter, his clothes still smelling of smoke, his face smudged. Nithotep stood defiantly, her hands bound, her chin high. Magnificent display. General Artabanus conceded, his voice calm amidst the continuing chaos of the plaza. "You won the moment, but you lost the war." "I lost a skirmish," Nithotep retorted, meeting his gaze. "The war for Egypt's spirit is just beginning. Cannot conquer the Nile with cuneiform." Artabanus smiled, a rare, tired expression. "Do you believe I will execute you?" "You mistake me for a conventional conqueror. Killing a symbol only turns it into a martyr." He ordered the Persian guards to stand back. "Needed a symbol of resistance to legitimize my control. I have found it, and now I will break it not with iron, but with political reality." He revealed his countermove. His agents had not only captured Nithotep, but they had also simultaneously captured the last loyalist to the fleeing pharaoh, Psamtik III. Psamtik III was still alive, hiding far to the south, but his last political agent, steward of his assets, was now in Persian hands. Artabanus's final deal was brutal. Nithotep would be granted safe exile and her soldiers released, but only if she agreed to one condition. She must write a final public letter denouncing the exiled pharaoh as a coward who abandoned his people, confirming the Achaemenid rule as the necessary replacement for civil stability. This was the final, devastating application of the invisible siege. forcing the symbol of resistance to legitimize the conqueror's claim through an act of supreme political betrayal. Nithotep struggled with the choice: her freedom and her soldiers' lives, or the continued symbolic purity of the rebellion under a leader she secretly despised as a failure. Recognizing the uselessness of martyring herself for a regime already broken, she finally, reluctantly agreed. She would write the letter. The letter, penned in her own unmistakable hand and disseminated throughout the Nile Valley, delivered the final crushing blow to the remaining loyalists. It ended the major organized military resistance. The ghost sting ceased. The populace, seeing their hero publicly denounce the old order, reluctantly accepted the new status quo. Artabanus watched as Nithotep was escorted to a waiting ship, granting her passage to Athens, where he knew her tactical brilliance would be a constant nuisance to Achaemenid foreign policy, but no longer a threat to the satrapy. The satrapy of Egypt was now fully secured, not by the destruction of the obelisk, but by the destruction of the political narrative of resistance. The obelisk, still standing with its scarred, ink-stained cuneiform, was repaired and formally unveiled the following day. Now a monument not just to conquest, but to the triumph of order over chaos, Artabanus, the master of the invisible siege, had achieved the impossible: the peaceful conversion of the most ancient, powerful civilization into a stable, Achaemenid province. He had demonstrated that in the future of warfare, political maneuvering, logistics, and psychological conditioning were superior to any number of chariots or infantry. He sat alone in the pharaoh's chamber, reviewing the endless ledgers, the new ruler of Egypt, yet still only a logistician at his desk. His final lesson: the conquest of a land is simple. The conquest of the hearts of its people is the true work of empire. Egypt, the phoenix of the Nile, would resist again, but for now, the Achaemenid peace reigned supreme. Part 4 concludes with the exile of General Nithotep and the consolidation of the satrapy. The story of Artabanus and the invisible siege is complete. I hope you enjoyed this journey through ancient strategy.